Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight on a very special episode of Spanning the Need, State of the Valley. This is something that we really want to talk about, and we're really going to make a difference, and hopefully we'll talk about that. This is in partnership with Action, which is a nonpartisan, non-profit organization with the alliance of 30 different congressional organizations, Black Watch groups in our community. On the panel tonight, our executive director and league organizer for Action, a faith-based organization, Rose Carter, pastor of Bethel Lutheran Church in Boardman, Ohio, Pastor Richard Kidd, and organizer for Action, also a pastor minister for the at St. Patrick's Catholic Church, Vicki Vicars. And just coming in right now, our fifth panel member from the Buckeye Review, Dr. Mike McNair. Doctor, thank you for joining us as well.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Right.
So what we're going to be doing is discussing a lot of different issues of what's going on in the community. We're looking at this as a panel discussion. We're going to talk about everything facing communities, from violence to jobs to economics to community. This is just to name a few. I have a packed house. I got a lot of questions for a lot of these individuals from a variety of different areas, and they all will provide their insight on what they feel and what they kind of see coming from a variety of different areas. Now, let me make sure we're clear. This is not just the city of Youngstown. This is the community as a whole. We want to make sure everyone's aware of that. So we're going to make sure that we cover everything. And don't be afraid to ask questions as well. So if you're viewing this and you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. If we have time and it relates to what we're trying to do, we'll be able to talk about it. We want to make sure that we cover a lot, and we're going to cover it real quick. Actually, we're going to get started. So we're going to talk. We think that one of the biggest issues with a lot of different things in our community is communication. We feel that people don't communicate enough anymore, either through just having, now we know from the pandemic that it's been very hard for people to communicate in general. So with how important is it for communication with all communities, the leaders, when we build cases, developing a formal communication program? Let's start with Pastor Kidd. Pastor Kidd, you work in the Boardman area, but you're also in the community as a whole. What does that look like to you?
Well, it's very important. The worst thing we can do is plan a community program without getting the community's input, or the voices in that community and the leader voices as well. So we need to find out what is appropriate for the context of the community. So it's not just top down, it's a grassroots collaboration. That's why it's good to work with Action of Youngstown, because we work with many church leaders and also community leaders, and it's multicultural. It's a diverse group. So that's why it's very important.
Right.
And we talk a little bit about, we talk to our community leaders, we talk to our people that are on the ground. Rose, what does that look like? And you've kind of been on the ground for a variety of different areas. What has that looked like over the last couple of years?
Well, one of the things, Anthony, that we look at, I was looking at a research by a group called Pew, and they were saying that 20% of our Americans, they don't really trust our government. And mainly it's because of a lack of communication. We don't really know what they're doing or what's going on. And today we were at a meeting with Nikki Pastoral, who is the mayor's chief of staff, and we learned so many different things about what's going on in the community. And I don't even want to say the community, I want to say in the government, that really we as community leaders should have known about. Especially, we were specifically talking about food insecurities in the grocery store and things like that. But then as we began to talk about the things that are going on in our government, we found out that we as a grassroots down on the ground, we really don't know what's going on. And that kind of disturbs me. We know technology. we know technology has a lot. We know, and as soon as the government or our local law enforcement, our local groups do something, they can't get on the phone and call the media and say, hey, the newspaper, and say, hey, I just did this or I did that. But there should be some type of communication. Perhaps we even talk to have, they should have someone that's all they do is communication. Communicators between the city and the grassroots organizations, because we've hired them, we've voted them in to do the work, so they don't have time to say, hey, I just did this or I did that. But if the city and our other groups, and I'm not just saying the city of Youngstown, because Action, we're Trumbull, Mahoney, and Columbiana, although we're located here in Youngstown. But if we had someone to actually to do the communication, it would be better, and our people would trust our government and local officials a little bit more.
Let me follow up with that. You talk a little bit about not trusting government, and now we're kind of in this massive pandemic. We've been in it for a little bit over a year, and you see what government's been trying to do, or we've seen a lot of, we'll talk a little bit about insecurities, a little bit part of this about down the road is, what does that look like? Because we know there are people that just don't have the resources to have internet. And that's not in just the city of Youngstown. That's in Austintown. That's in Boardman. That's in Canfield. That's in every district that you see. And let me go to you, Dr. Mike, as I like to call you. What does that look like when programs can't be communicated to the community because there's no avenue to do that? How do they get the word out, or what does that look like in the past?
It looks like a desert. Just like we have food deserts, right? Well, we know food is important, and we know that people need it, fresh food, available food, and we also know that the lack of it causes great expanses of places where people can't get food. The same is true, like you said. If internet is not immediately and widely available, and I'm talking about high-speed internet. And you know what? I guess the president just rolled out an infrastructure plan, which is going to aid in that piece. But certainly, when schools shut down, we saw it immediately. Not only not having the devices, but not having the high speed and not having a reliable connection. So a desert is a dry place. It's a desolate place, desolate of information. And so if you think of it as being hungry for information, desperate for accurate information, then how can we get information about vaccine, about school, about available resources? There's lots of resources available for people, food, money for rent, utilities, etc. But if they can't get the information, they're out there starving. And it's like, there it is, but they can't get to it, right? So communication, hugely important.
So let me ask this to the panel. Give me one solution you feel would help with communication with our community from lawmakers. One good suggestion that they may be able to follow that's been done good in the past, or that may be a new one.
Probably, and I did, Vicki, want you to mention about the technology and the high speed. But one of the things, our people in government, local government, have to come down out of the ivory tower and get down on the ground, grassroots with the rest of us. We'll talk about it a little bit more on the policing and that, and we'll talk about. But I heard the other day today, that the mayor said that with the shootings that he actually went and talked to the families and so forth. But a lot of times we have our officials that are just they're in their jobs. but they're not actually talking to our communities and our community through block watches. Some block watches haven't. Yeah, I'm not. Some block watches haven't seen an official ever.
Well,
But
and
then
I
there
think
are
that,
some that are more viable.
and I agree with that, because kind of block watches are your like boots on the ground, as you like to call them.
Exactly.
You got people that know what's going on in the community,
Yeah.
and I think that brings a great transition to what my next thing. And Vicki, I'm going to come to you on this, because you've kind of had a little bit of experience with this. Are some of the examples of the successes of what we've seen or potentials for the Valley? What do you look at for that?
I think a success is when people know about it, and that the more people it touches and the more people it uplifts, and it improves their quality of life in the Valley. So, for example, we were at the ribbon cutting ceremony just yesterday for the Center for Professional Development at Flying High. Wonderful, socially distanced crowd. But Jeff Magada and his staff there are really working hard to give people skills to get employment, and any other service they need that might be a challenge to that employment. So driver's license, or if they have substance abuse issues, he's addressing all that. But his program is only going to be successful if the community knows about it, if they know where to go to get those services. And so again, reiterating what Rose said, those block watch leaders and our city council folks and township commissioners need to know about that program and need to be able to get that information to their residents and to the people in their neighborhood. Mm-hmm. So I think that Center for Professional Development is a great success story just this week.
Right.
We talk a lot about success stories, that we see successes, but then at the end of the day, we're still waiting for them. Perfect good example, the Chill Can Factory.
Yeah.
And we want it there. We really do. And we see a lot of, and I want that project there because I want to boost the Valley. I mean, the more jobs you have in the Valley, the better quality of life is in some shape or form. So what do we look at when we look at these types of programs in that regards? Rose, let me go to you.
Okay, I was going to give it to Mike, but
well, if you want to pass it to Mike, I'll give it to Mike too.
Yeah. Well, I want Mike too, because and one other thing, just for me to back up about communications. Sometimes what happens, Dr. Mike, he has I still call it the Buckeye Review because I'm old. But here's the thing, we don't look at those avenues. We just look at maybe the Vindicator, or maybe Mahoning Matters, or maybe the news review that's in there. But there are other entities and there are other groups out there that make a difference. And so when I look at some of the information from our white counterpart partners, that information should be put also in our Black newspaper and vice versa, which we do. So I just needed to say that we need to have a better working relationship with our different groups, the different radio stations, newspapers, all of that. Now, on the Chill Can, I am just really upset about that because people were removed from their homes. Right now, there is a church right next door to the church that was to be torn down. Funds was to be promoted for that, and it has not come about. Now we actually have to go to court in order to get that, what was it, at 1.25 million, McNair, please correct me if I'm wrong. But it also goes back to our city leaders, because what I'm saying is I think more homework should have been done to make sure, not just to take take the word of somebody out in California. I'm on the Mahoning County Land Bank. And every time I'd ask what's going on, nobody knew. All we knew it was a Mr. Joseph. There is where the lack of communication. And then none of our own local people are in those jobs. So Mike, take it over, because I'm starting to get hot on it.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, it's unfortunate that when we look at the priorities of how we allocate our public funds, we put a high priority on things that, like jobs, and jobs are important. But think about it. All of the money that was spent on the development of, the areas around YSU and the downtown hotel, right? And there was indictments there, right? There was malfeasance there. There was people that either went to jail or should have gone to jail. Felonious activity, right? Because where there's a lot of money, there's usually a lot of corruption. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, as a public, invest in big projects. What's going on at Lordstown Motor, right now, LMC? It's kind of exciting, and it's a lot of money, and it's very positive. But there's also a little bit of, there's questions, there's a lawsuit, there's possibilities, that it could go belly up. But we put the priority because we have the hope of those jobs. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, because we should. So I don't fault the city, for what went down at Chilcan. We do it all the time. When Lordstown General Motors went belly up, right? The state had put 60-some million, millions of dollars, right? And when they're asking for half of it back now, or there was a deal that they had to do something about $30 million to give back, or something along infrastructure. And guess what? We didn't get it all back. We got some of it back with a promise to do more. Right. So whenever there's that carrot out there, we're going to bring all these jobs, and we say, okay, please give them to them. Please give them to us. Right. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but what I am saying is we need to temper it and really do the things that we really, really need. We really, really need high-speed internet for everyone. We really, really need to get information out to everyone. We're talking about communication. I love the fact that you open with that, because in my day job, I'm a marriage specialist, right? And the first thing people say when they have issues in a relationship is, we can't communicate, right? And we're right in the same house. We look at each other, pass each other, but we still don't communicate. I think that's what's happening with government, and it's what's happening with organizations. We have good information, and we send it out, and we assume people have it. But to close the loop, you have to get feedback. You have to get a response. You got to get a handshake. You got to get an encode, decode, and feedback. And then like what was going on in the East Side when the lady lost her house, or what was going on in Chilcan, it was taking a little bit too long, or the things that's going on. You know what I mean? So it's not just a one-way street, but it is a collaboration and integration for communication to really work. Not only for development, but to solve problems. If you can't solve problems just in a silo.
Right.
Well, I think we've looked at a lot of different partnerships, probably since Jay Williams, John McNally, Sam Rohn, where they looked at partnerships with the townships, or at least tried to do partners, the JED or the JED, and we've seen a lot of. And let me give you an example. So one big concern a lot of businesses have is the 2.75 income tax of the city of Youngstown, which is almost one of the highest in the state. There's a couple more. I think Franklin County is up there, maybe by just there. But then if you look at businesses that have either invested in Youngstown, or that have, like, for example, we lost a lot of retail businesses that went to the suburbs back in the late 70s, early 80s. So we've looked at that, but at the same time, there was the project by the mall. They wanted to look at doing they wanted to charge an income tax at the mall at one time, and people just went up in arms, because it's like, wait a minute, I I came to get a job because I didn't want to get charged a township tax. Or, I mean, some people move because they don't want to pay an income tax for a city. I mean, I live in the city. I pay an income tax. I'm more than happy to do that. So there are a lot of difficult things that I think people need to work through. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Am I right? Wrong? What do you got?
No, I think you're right. And I think with the Chilcan, Lordstown, I think the mayor, I think city council, those that are going to make the difference, I think they're going to look at things a little bit different. And they're going to make it, you're going to come into our city. Yeah, our tax is a little bit high, but then you're going to get quality. And so if you come into our city, we're trying to build our city. So we're going to want people from inside, our own people, to be able to get some of those jobs. I was looking at YSU. I'd go by there every day and they'd have a sign up. And evidently whoever was building the enclave or Cobb or whatever, those were not a union or people that was in the city that was actually workers. And so if you're going to be that big in the community, YSU, Mercy Hospital, different things, and you want to help make it the city great again, then you're going to want to be able to use some of our own people. That's why we've gone from, what was it, 167 down to, what are we, 60 some population?
Around 64 and some change.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me do this now. We are in a pandemic. Some people are for the recovery bill that just went through, and a couple of the big, massive stimulus bills going through that Congress passed, and then some are against it, depending what side of the aisle you're on. We talk about that Warren is getting about 28 million, and I think Youngstown's getting a little over 88, and some other communities are spread out through depending on their population and some additional things. So how has some of the funding from state and local governments kind of helped the community's program during this pandemic? And then I have a follow-up to that, because I think it's kind of the notion of what preparations do we have. So let me go to Vicki on this one. Vicki, you've kind of been in this area a lot with your church and some other areas. What does that look like?
So I think the monies that went to some of the social service agencies to assist folks with utilities and with rent and mortgage was a lifesaver. Our community could not have survived without that. We would have a second pandemic. We would have a lot of people homeless on the streets without those funds that Catholic Charities, MyCap, I'm sure Protestant Family Services all had access to that money. So that was a lifesaver for the city of Youngstown, for the county, and I'm sure for multiple counties across the country. So those funds were a good thing. And then even the personal stimulus checks, like you said, there's a lot of controversy surrounding them. Should they have happened? Should they have been more? Should they have been less? There are people that needed those. There are families that was life-saving money that kept them from losing their house, from having to sell a vehicle, that they were able to survive because they had lost an income due to the pandemic. So I think that money was critical. And then as far as the money that the city of Youngstown's getting right now, the 88 million, the meeting that Rose and I were in this morning, I think right now there's with a lot of federal money, there's some restrictions tied to that, and there's some stipulations as to what it's to be spent on. So I don't know that those funds are going to help individuals. I think that's more for infrastructure and business than actual families in the community.
Right.
Pastor Kidd, you're in the Boardman area. Have you seen a need during the pandemic as well?
Yeah, I've had a lot of calls of people needing help and stuff, and one program that's really helped businesses is that PPP loan, because it paid employers money so they could pay their employees, so they didn't have to let go people. So that was very good.
We talk a little bit about the money coming to local governments, and I hope and I pray that these dollars are spent wisely on projects that are going to sustain future. because now Warren City, Youngstown, Trumbull County, Mahoning are very old infrastructures.
Yeah.
Very old. And I know that Trumbull County, Mahoning County are also getting monies. So let me go to Dr. Mike on this. What do you think some of that should be used for preparation-wise for maybe another pandemic, infrastructure, social programs? What would you suggest or kind of look at, since you've been around a long time and you've kind of seen it all?
Well, I don't know that I've seen a lot, but I've heard a lot. and certainly we haven't seen this sort of cash infusion ever, right? So this is like a once in a, just like the pandemic was once in a lifetime for us to get literally $100 million, 90, 88, that's like a once in a generation infusion of cash. And to be honest, I think it's good that the mayor and the city council have decided we're going to set this aside and, carefully approach it, as opposed to, the catchers catch can and I need it for this, I need it for that. If there's a vision and a plan for it, they can do some really good things. Now, because it's a once in a generation, and trust me, I hadn't thought about, what would I do if I was in charge of, $88 million for the city, right? Well, I don't have the answer to that. I can tell you this. The priorities that we have seen, and this is federally and statewide and citywide, the priorities are put on business, and business does not look out for people. Somebody say amen.
Amen.
They say, we're going to give you jobs. And we say, yeah, we need the jobs. But when you look at the wealth gap and the income gap between the CEOs and the people that work, these jobs are not living wage jobs. If there were a way that we can use those funds to augment pay, to make sure that people that live in the city earn $15 an hour. So we can't, because the legislature has said, the state legislature has made a law that says cities cannot mandate a $15 an hour minimum wage. Now, there are cities in America who have done that, but Ohio has said that the cities in Ohio can't do that. Well, guess what? The city could use some of that money to augment a $15 an hour minimum wage for everybody that lives in the city, works at less than $15 an hour. And they can use those to augment that, because income is what the city needs. This is what residents need, is income, and not the kind of income that keeps you broke, not the kind of income that keeps you poor. I mean, Youngstown is the #1 poorest city in America.
Yes.
And even though we have the most affordable housing stock, we are the county seat. We are the go-to. I mean, the suburbs need our water. We should have annexed them all along the way. We didn't annex them. They just want to sell them the water. But we should.
Now you're going to be a city of Niles and Howland.
I'm just saying. So but the income, because when they said, okay, $1,400 check, well, it's going right into the economy, and that's good for the economy. It's good for people who needed the money, but it's a one-shot deal, right? Yes. But if we could use those funds to somehow augment the pay so nobody is broke, because the other thing is, look, during the pandemic, we know people who could telework, it's probably 35% of workers, they made out like fat cat, but they had high-speed internet. They didn't have to do dry cleaners. They didn't have to do gas to work. They got extra pay. They got extra pay just from working at home, and then they got a stimulus. But the essential workers who worked at Walmart, worked at the grocery store, and cleaned in the hospitals, they had to go to work. They're struggling, and if they could be augmented, I'll let that be my recommendation. If somehow that could be the recommendation, to augment city workers to make sure that they're at a $15 wage with some of those funds, and that would change our city.
I know that I think it was LA County in California put some sort of stipulation that you got to start paying your essential workers $2 or $3 more an hour, and per whatever they were getting paid, they were going to do that. And 2 or 3 people, actually 2 companies, Kroger's, I forget, it was a grocery store, said we're going to have to close because we can't pay that additional hourly wage. So you look at that. If you look, and Dr. Mike, I agree, and kind of look at it that would probably be a good investment. But how long does that investment go? What are the stipulations that go? Because I think we have to look at the whole picture and saying bankers are still retailers, bankers, hospital workers. That's a big list of people.
Sure.
And even in a lot of the outer rural areas too. So I get what you mean. I mean,
just think about the number of people though that work, right? It's for city rent. So if you live in the city, so you have to live in the city, right? In order for it to work. And if you live in the city, now it's taking care of the city, because we couldn't mandate that, police and fire live in the city, right? Well, we can mandate this, to get this, you have to live in the city.
You gotta live in the city.
And when you think about the number, because it's not that many, we say it's 66,000 people, but think about it, right? It's probably about 22,000 households, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then how many of those actually work in the city, right? Or, you work outside.
Per the census, I think we were at about 30,000 households. That was everything from single to family.
Okay.
If my numbers are correct, but I could be wrong. I'll just say that.
Well, I'm just saying, once you drill down the numbers are not as big as you think, and with a pool of multiple millions of dollars. And I'm not saying all 88, or even half of it, but if you had $25 million set aside for that, you could get matches because you're doing something innovative, and it could be invested and such that it'll last a long time, and people will start moving to the city. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation. I think at the end of the day is I think people want to work, and they want to get an honest wage to do it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
At the end of the day, and actually, I think this transitions to a great point. Is let me move on here. Is, do you think city leaders, and this is let me say community leaders, because we're looking at townships and cities because they're all on the same committees at the county and state levels, is receiving and responding to feedback on the issues and initiatives that impact them, and if so, what are they? Let me go to Rose first.
Wow. I think, I got to go back to communication. I think that the majority, I don't know, being a grassroots organizer on the ground, I hear so many different problems and issues where people say, I've called my city councilman, I've called city hall, I've called the mayor, and I'm not getting any results. And so I think until people actually come together and organize, I don't know if you remember with the predatory lending, we looked at the fact that people were not being listened to. We had so many different landlords that was outside of the city, especially South Carolina. Yeah, that was outside of the city that came into our city and did the predatory lending and kept people where they could not afford the housing that they had. The house was dilapidated, trees growing up. And until we took action, and that's my pun, until we took action against these landlords, nothing was done. And then we took it to City Hall. So there has to be a time when we have to come together on issues, because the city, our councilmen and so far are doing hopefully the best that they can. But there's so many issues in our community that they can't take care of all of them. That's why it is important that those city officials actually get their hands dirty and get down to the ground with us in grassroots. So yeah, they're listening, and that was one example. There are other examples that we had where we had to actually action worked against gun. We wanted we worked with I think it was Girard and Niles and Warren area, Girard and Niles against, we wanted background checks. They fought us. And until we went out there in the rain and stood on the sidewalk and tried to make a difference, they listened to us. So yes, Anthony, they're listening, but they need help.
Pastor Kidd, let me follow up with you on that. What do you think, kind of what you've heard on the ground level of this?
Well, there's predatory lending in Boardman. I know there's landlords in Boardman that's not upkeeping apartments and places for rent, and it's really sad. And they're getting away with it somehow, and it's a problem. And also in Boardman, there's the flooding issue, where there's a lot of flooding that's been addressed, and nothing's been done, or it's not being done fast enough.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems. I know in Howland they've been planning for that for years. I know Austintown, Boardman, and Canfield have kind of looked at a joint venture on kind of to prepare for the 100-year flood, the 500-year flood again. But just in general, I think what happened was in the past, the communities just sprawled out too fast at the time.
Yeah.
And there really wasn't very many ordinances or building codes in order at that time. So that's why you're now starting to see a lot of that with the planning and down the road. Let me follow up with this question. And I think this is a great question. I'm actually going to take it from one of our listeners because it talks about what we're looking at, initiatives and issues. The question is from Ron, and I'll post it. He goes, can you ask the panelists what ideas they have for lifting people up, not just giving a handout, but how to help? So that's a great question, I think. It really is. So Mike's thinking, I can tell his brain's moving. Vicki, do you want this, or Rose, who wants this?
Hey, Vicki can do it because we're doing it.
I can
Vicki?
start. You know, and I alluded to the Center for Professional Development earlier. I think lifting people up out of poverty means giving them and assisting them with the tools that they need. So job training, better transportation systems, a living minimum wage. You know, I know young moms in the city who are working 2 minimum wage jobs and still can't make ends meet. So better wages, better jobs, better training, better health care, you know, more access to health care. I think there's a lot of things that we can do.
Let me echo that, because I think just by the part of the question that says not just giving a handout, right? Just giving people a handout, kind of lends the idea to the assumption that poor people, you know, are poor because they're lazy. Right. I don't think that's what it was meant, but there are a couple of myths about poverty. And one of them is that poor people are poor because it's their fault, or because they're lazy, or because they just want a handout, or because they don't want to work. And that's a myth. It's not at all true. It's never been true. Matter of fact, I think the number one crime prevention tool is a good job.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. Amen. Amen.
It's a good job. A good job, right?
Good job.
Now, I can tell you that, you know, because we talk about training, education, and jobs as if that is the be all. And it is if the training leads to a good job,
Yeah.
right? And if the job that's available is given to our people.
People.
Because doors are closed. I've heard about the Chamber of Commerce having great programs and people going to hire, and we're happy to connect with the schools. And then employers say, but don't send folks from.
Right. Yeah.
Don't send folks. So, the door is closed before it's open, or it's open publicly, but it's closed privately. And we live in that reality all the time. And that's something that has to be dealt with, because that's why, it's not a handout, it's a hand up.
Yeah.
It's a hand up. That's why a living wage and taking care of people that really, really need it and dealing with that poverty situation, because it's not going to go away just, by giving a person 2 low wage jobs. That's and listen. Right. And when you start thinking about the trajectory of the last 50 years and how we've gotten, the corporations have made 1,000%, and workers have made nothing.
Yes.
If minimum wage had kept up with inflation and everything else from the 1970s, minimum wage would be like $17, $18 an hour now.
Yes.
So is that the last time, Mike? I think the last time that it didn't move for quite a while, the minimum wage. So I mean, it's been down it hasn't increased at all. Right. Let me follow up with this. I want to keep us on schedule. Let me ask this question, just kind of yes or no's, or maybe do you think that all of these services are out there for anyone to grab and people just don't know about them? The training, the all this stuff that's out there, but people may not know where to go. Is that a pretty good question to ask?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I think that they maybe don't have enough confidence in themselves. I am a huge believer in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if you are so concerned about where your next meal is coming from, or where you might sleep, or who's going to watch your child while you go make $8 an hour, you're not thinking about bigger career options. You're not thinking about going back to school because you're so consumed with those basic human needs. So I think it's a combination of not knowing and feeling like you're just not ready for that, or you can't tackle one more thing in your life.
And I think that's where the issue that we talked about when we referenced the question, that is community leaders listening to the issues and the initiatives that, hey, we need this stuff. There's a lot of, is there talk, or are people actually doing something about it?
I don't hear the $15 an hour, the wage increase. I don't hear that. We hear it, but I don't think anything's being done about it. And that's where we as organizers and people, we have to be able to push that. As I was listening, I'm like, I think Vicki Michelle brought us something, another young lady, about the young man that only makes, he's a highway patrolman in Pennsylvania, and he only makes how much a year? Or
yeah, it was like $13 or $14 an hour, but she was actually talking about our own city police officers and I think sheriffs also in Mahoning County. Their starting wage is $13 to $14 an hour for the city.
Yeah. And I know for a fact it was in the news, not even maybe like before the pandemic, city officers were getting well trained by the city PD, right, and then going to townships or everything outside or outside of even the county,
right,
to make $20 an hour, $18 an hour. So right. I think you see a lot of that you kind of get this is just my personal opinion, is it's sometimes you kind of got to increase your own wage so everyone jumps on board to move it. I don't know if that's, you kind of look at it as take the leap and then everyone follows. Why be a leader? But that's just I'm not a business owner, so everyone has their own needs. So everyone don't jump on me. But I understand each runs their own business, and but I think everyone should deserve a good solid wage for what they're doing and whatever job that is.
Yeah, and I think they'll take more interest in what they're doing and even staying in the city.
Right, right.
Well, even just in the valley, or I'd say in the valley in general,
In
because
the valley, yeah.
a lot of young people leave this area. I had a lot of friends when I graduated 20 years ago, left to go because jobs weren't around here, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. So, well, and this actually jumps on what we're talking about is when this is kind of, we look at it this way, is what has or has not kind of been, what have been some huge impacts in our community that have really affected us the most, pros or cons? Because we looked at GM left. That was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that was at one time, I think there was 15,000 people that worked there 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The mills,
The mill.
jobs in general.
Yeah.
I mean, big companies, and now you have small companies trying to fit that huge void. So what does that look like? Let me go to Rose on this.
I thought about the hospitals. Who would have even thought that Northside Hospital would be closed? And you kind of wonder, what are the politics behind it? I know that, and that puts so many people out of jobs, and that's not able. But when we look at the steel mills, I think we put too much emphasis on certain groups and forgot about the little guy. And so when you look at the hospital, GM, Packard, and a lot of times financial, one of the people just said financial literacy. Yeah, teaching people exactly how to do it. I know that when I was in banking, right now it is like, oh, you should be the bankers. We only played with the money. It was just a prestige job. So many things have happened to us in our community and in our valley that has just left us.
Pastor Kidd?
Food insecurity is what we were talking about earlier. I mean, that's a problem. Access to fresh fruits and vegetables, healthy food in areas that need it, and especially downtown. And that's why Action is involved with the pop-up markets and lobbying for a grocery store, near the people.
Yeah,
that is a big problem. Also, another problem is what we were talking about, the gun violence and crime, and why is this happening? What areas and why is that happening?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we look at it that we want jobs to come to the area. We've seen these jobs and then they've left because the city townships give these 75% or 100% abatements, taxes that are supposed to go to the schools, no matter what school you're from. It could be the city of Salem, which does it, the city of Youngstown, the city of Warren, Girard, Campbell, they all do it.
They all.
Townships have their own type of package deal on a different level. But I think what people don't realize is, we give those abatements, and then in 5 years or 10 years, they either move to a different location, or they just don't go. They go out of business. And let me go to Dr. Mike on this, because I see your mind's moving. What do you think of that? Yeah, what do you think of that kind of thought process of what I'm going through?
Well, I agree, but because businesses play municipalities against one another, like Amazon said, I'm coming here, and we're so
nothing wrong with that. It's business.
And so that's why I think government has to. Let me connect two dots. Right, the first dot is when we talked about people don't trust government. It has a long tail to it, right? That long tail is, I don't trust government when it doesn't do what I want.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But we need desperately good government, right? Mm-hmm. Because the legislation that said, voting rights, right? It wasn't until 1965 that everybody had the right to vote.
Yeah. Wow.
And it took years after that for it to be implemented. And then in 2013, the Supreme Court took the teeth out of that, right? So it starts with government, and it has to be good government. And it's the same thing with jobs, right? If government said and mandated a minimum wage, the businesses, it will cost something to businesses. But
Yeah.
that's what business is. That's what capitalism is. It grows and it adapts. That's why most businesses don't pay taxes, because it adapts.
Right. Yeah.
So government has to take care of people instead of focusing more on business, because business is a chameleon, right? They will fit where they want to fit. They're not all going to pick up and go. Some of them will, but some others will come, right?
Yeah.
Government's setting the standard, because if you think about business and what it's done, or capitalism, or what it's done and what it will always do, it will consume everything and every person forever, right?
Yes.
For healthcare, we don't care. We don't care. We don't care. And then start thinking about the legislation, all banking legislation, how it changed. Remember, you used to be able to get a deduction for your house mortgage. That's
Right.
Remember we used to get a what's it called, a grace period on our bills.
Bill, yes. No more.
Right? I mean, all these little fees and things, they creep
Well,
up.
it's when you talk about that, Dr. Mike, it's like people talk about like Amazon not paying on billions of dollars of revenue or something. That's just our tax code. If people, if the IRS thought that Amazon was faking numbers, they'll go right after them. We hope.
Right.
And that's like anyone. That's like someone taking the standard deduction or itemizing everything. You can itemize your property taxes. You think I'm going to do it? Yes, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So you're doing what's given to you by the IRS.
By the IRS, yes.
I guess my point is we're giving them so much because those tax codes can only be closed by the government. It can't be closed by you and me, or the woman that's working 2 minimum wage jobs. They can't close that, right? They can't make them do better. They're not, but we can make them pay more, and then they'll figure out a way to,
Do it. Yeah.
to deal with it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and I think we look at different avenues. And let me go to you, Pastor Kidd, real quick, and we'll kind of end this and move on. Is that the impacts we've seen are huge, because all those businesses that were in the downtown years ago are now in the suburbs. And that drives traffic to the suburbs, that drives revenue to the suburbs, and it just drives to all those communities. So what have you seen over so long that you've seen in Boardman, at least? Did you hear me, Pastor Kidd?
I see a lot of businesses in Boardman, but I've seen a lot of them. Yeah, I've seen some businesses in Boardman, but I've seen some close as well. But yeah, I would like to see more businesses, in Youngstown as well. I mean, if the businesses in Youngstown, if they're if they're doing good, then Boardman will do good, and vice versa.
And the county,
we work together,
right? And the county benefits, right?
Yeah.
The city's part of the county, and the county benefits from all of those sales taxes and all activity. And I just want to throw in one more thing. I'm sorry, Tony, you guys invited me, so
I'll expect something afterwards, Dr. Mike. Go ahead.
You mentioned the city versus the suburbs, and I'm glad that you did, because when it came up during the election, we're talking about identity politics and all of this with the suburbs. We're still talking about wealth inequality and income inequality, and we don't talk about the fact that the government created the suburbs, right?
Wow.
They created the suburbs with legislation, with preferred loans, and they blocked blacks from being there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the same time that we worked together, lived together, worked in the factories, They said, "Oh, here's some preferred loans, preferred developments for you white folks, and you white everybody else stay here." That's why the 200 cities in America where we find most black people, they're concentrated because they could not move to the suburbs. If they did, they were burned out, fired out, or then they drew the government drew a red line around the cities and our houses, and the wealth. Imagine, nice house in the suburbs in 1950. What's it worth now? Right? Same house in the city. What's it worth now? That's the wealth gap right there.
Yeah.
Well, let me go ahead. Sorry to interrupt, because actually that gears me. What I want to talk about next is jobs. Okay, we talked just a little bit about jobs, but where has or hasn't there been resistance in expanding the approach to get jobs, and community building? I think those are two big things, because that's just not in Mahoning County. That's in Trumbull and Columbiana.
Yeah.
They're trying, and I think what happens is these areas don't have enough resources to compete to bring jobs in some capacity. Like we would have loved to have an Amazon right smack in the middle of Akron, Canton, or Akron, Cleveland, and Youngstown.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me go to Vicki first on this. But what does that look like?
So first, I happened to read in the Business Journal the other day that the chamber projected 2.8 billion in business and jobs it was last year in 2020. So I think that's a huge success, and I think they were saying that was 1,300 jobs in the valley, which isn't a lot, but it's a good amount. So I think there are some successes. I think resistance tends to sometimes come from people wanting to operate in their own little silos, and to not cooperating with one another, to not forming strong collaborations and partnerships, and working on some of these projects together. That, maybe if we cooperated as a county, if all the townships and all the municipalities cooperated together, even counties cooperated together, and put our best foot forward and promoted our strengths, that we might have a better chance. I think isolation and competition between politicians, between clergy, between small businesses, I think we need to work better together.
Well, I think the biggest example that I can feel that communities work together was Valcor in City of Girard and Youngstown. Massive nearly $1 billion project, because we had communities working together that had the same goal: keep jobs here. And let me go to you, Rose. What kind of build on to what Vicki said? What do you see?
Well, when I look at jobs, I mean, us working together. Yeah, I agree with that, and I agree when she said they're just our own little silos that we've got. So what happens is, yeah, we get the jobs, but those jobs go to our uncles, our aunts, our good friends. I mean, others are not. It's not a fair pool, so to speak, to me. It's well, I know this person, so I'm going to be able to get the job. And then the jobs are not given to our people here in the community. Those jobs, you were right, Anthony, on the Valcor. That was the best project that we have. But what has happened with that project now? They have laid off a lot of people in the community. And a lot of those jobs were jobs that were given to city people or valley people from, say, Girard, Youngstown. But yet and still, it was booming. And now, where are we at? We're almost to the point, to me, of the steel mill.
Well, I think their big boom was the natural gas boom in this region. The Appalachian region is what they were looking at. And I think now they've found a couple different suppliers, and they're kind of moving in that same but different direction. And let me ask you, Dr. Mike, because I know you've kind of like we talked about, you've seen and heard a lot. And I'm actually going to ask. Actually, let me ask everyone this. So we all know that Youngstown was a booming steel industry over almost more than a century until the late 70s, early 80s. I apologize, late 70s, early 80s. And we look at that as, what can we learn from the past that we can use now that can help us? Because I think people want to live here. It's like you said, Dr. Mike, it's good. It's very easy to live out here because of the what am I looking? The price of everything within reason. I should say within reason. I can't find the right words.
The most affordable.
Affordable. There it is.
Affordable.
And we look at that kids leave. I mean, I had graduates leave, smart people leave, and President Tressel has done a great job to try to bring in business and a lot of public-private partnerships. What else can we look for future that we can learn? I mean, I think that's a great follow-up question, because you guys have all been around a long time. You've been on the grassroots of hearing and seeing a lot of stuff. So anyone want to jump on this one? I'm kind of diverting probably from my agenda, but I want to hear this because I think this is a great thing, because there was a couple questions on our people supplying questions that talked about jobs and some other things.
Yeah. When we look at, Vicki, you want to go?
Go ahead.
Okay, but when I looked at with Jeff Magada and MyCap and the city coming together the other day, that was really great, because number one, it was educating the people, giving them jobs, but it was also allowing for that all around, that wrap around program. I think he named 7 things, I think, Vicki, it was, where you didn't have a driver's license, if you had some chemical dependency. So it was looking at the whole picture of the people. And I think that if we have more workforce and the city really gets behind it, and not only that, go out into our suburbs. One of the things, poverty is not just in Youngstown, it's in our valley. Mm-hmm. And so we have to come up with different ways that we can help the whole person, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Well, I think mental's taken a huge toll on everyone over the last year.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to chime in on this one real quick?
I just want to echo, on the mental health piece, because I work with, clients and couples, and many of them, not all, are African American. I operate a newspaper whose target is primarily African American, and while we are trained and learn to be in the world with everybody else, and the same jobs, the same education, the same opportunities. I've been here long enough to know that although we say that and teach ourselves that, the reality is it's not the same. And so when YSU gets 1,000 jobs, we hope to get a handful, right? When Lordstown gets 1,000, we hope to get a handful. And so the oppression and the discrimination, and I'll just say it, the racism is real. It has not changed. And so I'm often thinking, think about the big picture. Yes, lower taxes, and yes, attractive businesses. But I'm also thinking about, the dual message that the majority is not talking about. The fact that, yes, there's jobs, but y'all can't get them, right? Yes, there's opportunities, but we don't really mean you. It's like the suburbs. Yes, there's some, but y'all can't go, right? I mean, that's an old story that's still kind of new. And the fact that it hasn't changed a lot puts me in this quandary of, I need extra communication for African Americans. I need extra support you know, and I know there's an attitude out there. I'm reading the book called The Sum of Us right now. It's called The Sum of Us. I can't remember the author, but that's the title. And it says that there's a great number of white folks that believe that if the country is more fair to everyone, it's going to be less fair to white people.
Ooh, I've heard that.
Right. So obviously that's not true, but if a lot of people believe that, that's why they're against. Or is that a handout? Or is that a affirmative action? Or is that a special effect? Oh, you know what I mean? So that's why I'm sensitive to extra stuff that's needed, because in the mental health field, right, we have people that are depressed and anxious because they're carrying two messages. I go to church, I praise the Lord, I'm encouraged, and I get slapped upside the head, and I can't get the job, and the door's closed, and I'm trying, and I'm hoping, you know what I mean? I'm back, you know. So I'm just speaking. Let me
ask you this question, we know that the news has changed quite a bit, transition depending what you watch. Do you think that because people maybe don't watch? I mean, I watch local news. Do I watch national news? Maybe not as much as I used to from the election. So I think that may be a factor, because I was doing a paper last semester for my master's degree about social media platforms and how accurate the information is. I think that's one big thing that says, hey, most of the information that people get is from social media. And is it true or is it not true? Is it accurate? Is it not accurate? And I think that's one thing. I mean, you talk with social media experts. That's one of the big things, is are people getting the correct information? And that's why I do this type of panel, is because we're getting it from people. You're not hearing it from social media. You're not hearing it from different. So I just want to kind of leave it at that, because I want to keep moving, because there's a lot of great questions that people are supplying, and I want to get through my agenda. And actually, this one actually, I'm going to look at it this way, kind of carry it over to kind of policing and everything like that. We talked to the police chief, and there's been a lot of shootings in Youngstown over the last 2 months. I mean, nonstop. Everywhere you look, the shooting occurred 2 hours ago. I'm sorry, 3 or 4 hours ago. And they always talk about, well, we're going to have more saturation patrols. That could be in a neighborhood, that could be in a township, out in the rural area. I know when they have DUI checkpoints, they do saturated patrols around those in a lot of areas. Do saturated patrols work in our communities to curb violence, or is there another way? Let me start with Rose on this one real quick, and then I'm going to go to Vicki.
You know what? I look at it, and I was talking to Vicki and Michelle. When I first looked at it, I said I didn't feel that saturating an area, it can go two different ways, because of what we as African American and brown people have gone through with racism and the police, and in certain areas of our valley, you know, automatically when we see a lot of police, we get a little nervous about it. I know that if I see along the roadside, I see a whole bunch of police, I'm looking, and then I'm like, let's go, you know. So I just wondered, with our young people, you know, if they haven't been taught or brought up to be able to integrate with the police as young people, like I was. My husband was a highway patrolman, so my girls always knew the police. I mean, it wasn't they were not afraid, and my grandchildren. But then I looked at that maybe we do need the saturation of more police, but those police would be community policing, not as a program, but the police, but someone like, and Vicki will probably talk about it, Mr. Malik, Is he?
Yes.
Yeah. Someone that's in charge of the program between the community and the police department. And that's what is needed now, is where we can actually learn how. We can have the saturation if we understand that there are good police out there and what they're doing. So it's about education and making sure that not only our community is educated, but our police departments and our police is educated and taught how to deal with us,
Vicki?
brown and Black people.
So
Vicki?
Michelle did some research on this question, and the short answer is that police saturation does work, that police presence is a deterrent to crime. Absolutely. And as Rose was talking about, that relationship piece is critical. And I am thrilled with Officer Mostella's position as a community liaison with the Youngstown City. And he's been there not even a month, and already he's developed some programs and has worked to meet block watch leaders and has worked with Action to deter crime and develop that relationship. They delivered Easter baskets to over 140 families in the city this past weekend. I think earlier last month, they took flowers to some of the Youngstown City school students. So they are working hard, and I give them credit and kudos and cheers for establishing that relationship that builds trust.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think, go ahead.
That they're not in this alone, that our community safety is not just their responsibility, that as citizens who live in this valley, we have an obligation. If we see something, we have to talk about it. We can't close a blind eye to what is endangering the lives of our neighbors. We have to be active participants in protecting our community. And on that note, and I think many of you have heard, we've got these hotspot cards that Action has launched. A little promo here.
Can you explain what that is? Because I think we saw a little bit about it, but we don't actually understand what it does. So if you could give a quick, 30-second, just a quick thing about those cards and how they work, so people understand what it really is. Because I was like, a card? What's a card? What's a card going to do? So go ahead, Vicki.
This one's actually filled out, so I want to be careful. But this is an opportunity for the average citizen and neighbor to report any illegal activity in their community, in their own neighborhood, in another neighborhood. And then they turn it into us. It comes to Action. So we screen it. We then send it off to the police department. So the police have no idea who it comes from. They can report license plates, phone numbers, neighbors' addresses, whatever they feel is pertinent information. So it's anonymous. It's a way to report illegal activity. There's a phone number on here that is our phone number. It's Action. This phone number is dedicated just to this program, and there's also an email. And again, we are committed to keeping this anonymous. We printed 4,000 cards. We're almost out of them. We've given them to every Youngstown City Council member, to the mayor. I had a request from police captains to get them. We're sending them to our churches. Right now, we're just in Youngstown, but we do want to expand. When we did this 15 years ago, we were in Boardman, Canfield, Camel, Struthers, Austintown. So we are getting there to include the entire.
You're looking at really expanding this in the Mahoning Valley, no matter what department it is, police or non-police. So you're looking at, so if someone wants these cards, do they contact Action?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So actionoh.com. There's your website, guys. Got it by heart. You like that?
Oh, great.
Let me get Mike on this. Mike, what do you got an opinion on saturated patrols?
Actually, yes, I agree. The research is that saturation helps, right? Police presence is a deterrent to people who want to do bad things. So absolutely that works. But the community police thing, think about it. It comes and goes as if it's like, oh, it's flavor of the day. But community police is a relationship with the community. And if you keep the relationship going, then you don't have to start all over, right?
Yes.
You know, we know the cop, they come to the block watch, they know the neighbors, they know the kids. That's what community policing is. So now when something happens, everybody, you know, on board because we trust. You know, it's a saturation of strangers coming in like an occupying force. Well, of course that works because nobody wants to be up against a weapon and, you know, heavy armor, right? But that saturation is only good for the presence that it is. It costs a lot of money, a lot of overtime. You know what I mean? Whereas how much does it cost for community police on an ongoing basis? Or what SERV does when they have someone, you know, like what Malik is doing now in his short time. They're starting a basketball league, right? Like we're bringing back midnight basketball, the community police. Now, these things are important. But if they're not sustained,
Right.
if they're not prioritized,
Right.
then how do we, you know, sort of like if I, you know, if I've been abandoned and someone shows up, it's going to take me a minute to figure out, do you really love me? Right? Do you really care? You know what I mean? And if you know, as soon as the budget changes or the mayor changes and then like, oh, no, we don't have that anymore. It's like, you know what I mean? So, you know, we have that kind of relationship with the police.
I remember when I was the chair and on the Park and Rec Commission for the city of Youngstown, I used to be told about the old Southside Fieldhouse midnight basketball games. I used to hear the stories about the people that used to play in those. You want to talk about people that went in the NBA and went to all these college places and now are just people doing well in the community. So I would have loved to have been in the South Field House, which is an old field house. I wish they would have took care of it, but it's basically done now. So let me move on. So let me go to you, Pastor Kidd. You've been in Boardman. You've seen a lot. You've been with different areas. What examples of insecurities has kind of the pandemic really brought out in the Valley, or what has already that we knew about? Just we thought it was a little bit, but now it's even bigger.
I talked about it earlier, but it's the food insecurities, the crime and the gun violence that we've been seeing, and the poverty that's going on in the area are just some of the things I talked about earlier. And the elephant in the room is institutional racism. That is a problem.
Yeah.
What do you think should be some priorities for? I think we lost Dr. Mike's video.
Yeah, I think we lost.
Oh man,
I'm coming. I'm here.
We can hear you, but we can't see you.
Yeah, we can't see you.
Okay.
Well, there he is.
I had to plug in my computer.
Yeah. What do you think some of the priorities should be? Like what because I mean that's just not in Youngstown. That's in some of the outer surrounding townships and rural areas, especially rural country, where there's a lot of poverty out there.
You know, Anthony, when we look at now, I do watch a lot of television. I watch a lot of CNN. You know, I've been following the trial and just so many different things that that's sort of like my pipeline. I don't listen to a lot of stuff on Facebook, even though we're on Facebook, but I like this. And I want to thank you, Anthony, for this because it allows you to have real people. I mean, it's okay to listen to, you know, some people from Washington, D.C. or whatever. But what about us that we, you know, we're 2 steps from poverty. We're not. And I saw something the other day that said about white privilege, that Black people have struggled, but so has white people struggled to to accomplish different things. But because of the color of our skin, then we have had it a little bit harder. But I also watched, there's a new African-American mayor. Doc, did you see her in St. Louis is the new mayor of St. Louis?
Yes.
And I have been in St. Louis, scared to death in East St. Louis on a conference and on one of those trains, and it was going backwards and I was scared to death, but there was a black fire department and a white fire department, a black police department and a white police department. And I was just shocked because I mean, I know about racism and things that are happening and institutional, Pastor Kidd, institutional racism in our country. But this woman has a big job ahead of her as an African-American woman mayor. When you get a chance, read that. And this had been over years that East St. Louis and St. Louis had been that. And so to me and to action, the only way that we're going to fight institutional racism is to come together and talk about it, educate it, teach it, get to know each other, and then get out there and work together to make a difference. The only way we're going to make a difference in our valley is our Black and white partners have to come together and make a difference in our community in all. And it's a tough job. It's a tough job.
Let me follow up because there are a lot of issues that we have, especially with the pandemic. You've seen everything come out pretty much. And let me pose a question to you about insecurity. Insecurity in the Mahoning Valley, what does that look like? I want to expand on the question. Let me go to Dr. Mike on this because I caught you off guard there, didn't I? So that's what happens when you just coming in to our meeting. And if not, I'll go to someone else. But what is that? What does it actually look like, insecurity in the Mahoning Valley, when it comes to, I mean, what's out there that we're having a lot of issues with?
Well, our valley is not different, from what's going on all over the country. And like Rose said, it's not just Black folks, it's white folks, it's rural, the poverty issues, insecurity looks like, I can't pay my rent. It looks like, my food, it looks like the woman who had to go to work at a pizza shop and leave her children alone.
Yeah. Amen. Amen.
She had to go to work. Her children were young and she felt like, oh, the 9-year-old can handle it. And someone ratted her out, right? They weren't trying to help her. They were trying to hurt her. She was just trying to take care of it. That's insecurity because, the law says you're an irresponsible mom. But the larger system says you better go to work or you're lazy. You don't get a handout, right? So insecurity is I want to pay my rent. Now that's financial insecurity, not to mention those without health care. So universal health care, and we talked about, living wage, minimum wage. I mean, that's not having those things. That's insecurity. I'm sick and I can't go to the doctor because I can't afford. Listen, 40% of Americans with health care are having trouble with their pays.
Exactly.
And so there's a huge number that don't have health. You know what happened? I think it was Missouri who voted finally to expand Medicaid, because the governor said, no, we don't want Obamacare, so they voted. Yes, we want it. Yes, we want it. And now it passed and this legislature still won't do it. So that mindset of, leadership putting a thumb on the basic needs, healthcare, wages, income, and we always talk about education as if the proper education gets you where you need to be. And while we know that is true, we also know that even with the best education, if you're not treated fairly, then You know, listen, I got 5 college degrees, and I could tell you stories.
That's it? Only 5, Mike? Only 5?
Only 5.
Okay. Well, let me, because we talk about how we had bottom dollar in the city of Youngstown. We had other grocery stores in some of the suburbs, and they are now all gone.
Yeah.
And we look at education. We look at the city of Youngstown. We look at some of the townships. I think it seems to be a domino effect from everything you just said, Dr. Mike. Education is kind of your groundwork, and for example, in education is the groundwork to get to almost where you want to be. And then you got healthcare. People should be able to get healthcare, because the more healthier you are, the better off you are.
Right.
Why should someone have to decide, should I pay my healthcare bill or should I put food on the table?
Yeah.
And I will be, I'm kind of off script here, but I got to give Mike and Second Harvest Food Bank all the world, what they've done over the last year. I know they've worked nonstop for 12 months the first day it went. So I commend you, Mike, and your staff and everything, all the volunteers, the National Guard, everyone. So just off script on that. So
Right.
Any other follow up on the insecurities?
You know what? When I looked at the insecurities, I thought about that it's not just. I heard somebody say poor people. No, I remember going to the doctor and I needed a scan or something, and it said, she said, you'll have to pay $280 some up front, and I'm like, what? And I thought, I don't need that bone scan. I'm doing okay. So,
well, and I understand.
It's sad. So think about, I mean, I probably could have came up with it, but still, I might have had to borrow it from Mike or Pastor Kid or Vicki. But the thing about it is, think about the people that really needed it, really needed it. And I have insurance, and that was aside from the insurance. So that was another thing that we're looking at, Anthony. We're looking at the food insecurities, because Action, we've probably fed over 15,000 people in the past, year or two? I think with hot meals, whatever funds that we could get. However, it goes further than that, because it's the health. They need the education on how to take care of their bodies, so that they can take away obesity and diabetes and all of those things. And so we're looking at the big picture. Action is of going into the healthy, working with Mercy Health, working with Oak Street, and that's not just Youngstown, that's suburbs, that's our valley, period. So, and we know about the grocery store. In 2016 is where we declared that we were going to work on food insecurities. And then the mayoral candidates signed a pledge that they would set up a task force, because the mayor he pledged that it was declared that it was a food desert. Well, I did run away.
Where's the? I like they say they signed a pledge. Where's the task force and what was the report? Because one thing I've learned in Youngstown, we love hiring consultants to give us evaluations on stuff, and then sometimes, now this was years ago, I haven't really paid attention, but years ago they did a bunch of surveys or did studies, and the studies looked well, but then some of the city leaders didn't go that way.
It's been 4 years. We're waiting on that grocery store, just like Eastern Gateway. We're the ones that, and no, we didn't get credit for it, but we're the ones that said we want a brick and mortar Eastern Gateway. Well, I want a brick and mortar grocery store. In the meantime, We put out our pop-up markets all over the city, in every place. Yeah. And now I think we're even going into Boardman, someplace else. But with the veterans and Liberty, things like that on the north side. But we need to get the food insecurities is not going away. And we need to get a mobile market. We need a mobile market. Yeah, I want the grocery store, but why can't that mobile market travel right along with that grocery store and go into our high-rise communities, go into Boardman, go into the, I know a group, a family that's living in a motel in Boardman, but they need that food. They need access to food.
Right.
So the food insecurity is not going away. It has helped a lot. Actions did a lot. YNDCs did a lot. Who is it?
A lot of organizations have stepped up. A lot of the churches, federal funding. If we didn't have federal funding, we would have been not very good.
Yes.
So we've kind of ended some of the main questions that I had. Now I want to go to some of the questions with some of our viewers that actually are asking some decent questions. So I'll kind of pick and choose which ones, because some we've already talked about.
Okay.
We already talked about the first part of this. This was actually a Dr. Mike suggestion. This is from Kimiette Myers. It says, how would you get the augment salary for city workers implemented? How would you get the city manager or planner to listen to that plan to allocate a percentage of those funds? And how can this panel organize together to make this an ask? I think it's a great, and let me answer this to a point, and then Mike, maybe you can jump in. It's a great thought. I think it needs to be thought of a lot on how it's done, because you really have to look at where that's going to be implemented, if it's city, if it's township, what that looks like. You got to get input from business leaders, the regional chamber, city government, and look, it's something that's great. It needs a lot of studying. What do you think, Mike?
I agree. It's a visionary piece, right? But it starts with the priority. If people are a priority, it can happen. Yes, we have to get some thinkers. We have to do planning, not the chamber, because they are strictly capitalists, and which means, for profit. And it has this narrative of, of exploitation, which is what business does. I have, I own a business. I don't pay people as much as I can pay them. I pay them as little as I can pay them, right? And if the government said you better pay them this much, and that's as little as you can pay them, then a lot more people would be helped. So yes, it's a big ask, but if it were a priority, it would be worth thinking about and planning toward. I absolutely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else want to jump in on this, or I'll go to the next question? I did Mike because Mike brought this up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just add, because this thought's been floating around.
Good, Vicki.
Several of us are coming at this from a faith perspective. Action is a faith-based community collaboration. My faith teaches me that people are our greatest commodity, that people are more important than profit. And I think that people run the businesses, and people have a voice. And so we need to consider that people are our greatest commodity, and we need to value them as such.
Right.
Here, Vicki. Here.
Yes.
Now, in one of the questions, we talked a little bit about the money, the 88 million, the money that's coming to the townships and cities. And one of this person, infrastructure, update water lines, sewages. It doesn't back up into Mill Creek Park. Yeah. That's a good one. And kind of upgrade high-speed internet, which was mentioned by Pastor Kidd and Mike and Dr. Mike. And kind of, what do you guys think of this type of response when you talk about getting ideas from people in general or from leaders? Pastor Kidd?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we need that. We need all of that. We need to get leaders on board with it. I mean, if the people want it, we should fight for it, work for it, and voice our concerns.
Collect.
Well, I
So-
think, and I think it goes back to the question that we had about, does our city leaders listen to our issues and feedback? And as Rose mentioned, that she's heard of people calling city council or township leaders and kind of working their way. So there's always, and I hate to say this, there's always two sides to everything. There, depending on what that is, and we look at it, it's different. And I think that using this money should be strategically in the growth of these areas. That's just my personal opinion. I look at strategic. I look at bigger picture, not just an individual. Like, let me give you an example. Back in when I was the park chair 10 years ago and was on the commission with great folks, we had 50 to 60 properties. Okay. And the properties were supposed to serve 165,000 people in the city of Youngstown. Okay. And well, we only had 65,000. So how does the city change their way of thinking in that regards? That's just me thinking out loud.
Exactly.
Right. That was kind of that Youngstown 2010 thought. We're shrinking as a city. So how do we bring our resources to bear on a smaller population with better services? And so I think, the idea about the infrastructure and the water lines, I love the fact that the infrastructure bill that's being proposed by President Biden right now is going to replace all of the aging water lines in America.
In America.
Right? In America.
It's going to cost more than $650 billion.
Yeah. So the fact that that's on the table is very important. High-speed internet is important. And of course, there are other things in that bill too. But just like we're talking now, it's important that we are, like you said, Anthony, excuse me.
Whatever. I get called way worse sometimes.
We have to keep,
Anthony, also, Dr. Mike and Vicki, when we're looking at, I like the question that whoever it was that made it. And that's why, and I think, Anthony, you mentioned it, those city leaders are going to have to be strategically sound, looking at that money. And I think, Anthony, you said it, not like, we got dollars. Well, let's buy this, let's buy that. Updating those water lines, making sure that spending that money strategically so that it goes back to the community.
Well, it's a one shot. They ain't getting this ever again.
No.
So I hope I'm having a speaker series for the mayoral candidates, that the candidates, we've been asking them questions on violence and asking the same question about the parks and downsizing, or what is because that's just not in the city of Youngstown. That's in all of these municipals. Because some are shrinking and some are just not. So you got to have a specific of what your needs are. Now, I'm not going to jump on he say, she say. The people vote for who they vote for. So we hope you get out and vote to the people that you vote for. So we'll talk more about that. May 4th vote.
Yeah.
There's not much on the ballots.
Early voting started.
Yes. Yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, started yesterday.
Yeah.
So you can
okay.
vote.
So I got, let me see. Do I have anything else? I do not. I think we are good. Everyone? Does anyone that's watching, does anyone have any more questions for the panelists? I love just doing it that way.
Well, I one of the things I want to mention too, and forgive me for not, is that, we're part of the next step. And not only do we have the hotspot cards that is helping our police, but also those next steps. Coalition is making sure that our police are accountable for their actions, body cams and all of those things. We have had quite a learning for the past 2 years.
Right.
And we've had 2 or 3 pandemics.
Right.
And so we have learned about it, and we're hoping that our city officials, county officials realize and have learned and will be even more prepared for any type of pandemic that we have. They did an excellent job, but there's always room for improvement. Amen.
Well,
Amen.
I will leave it as an amen. Does anyone have anything to add for the good of the order, as you like to say at the end of a meeting?
Action is celebrating their 20 years of service and dedication, their virtual banquet. That's going to be May 25th. That's on a Tuesday at the Business
And your
Youth
guest
Center.
speaker is the new bishop.
Bishop David Bonner.
Yes.
Very
And
great guy.
We're honoring Delphine Baldwin, Jan Strasboud,
Aaron
Bishop and her commit group, and Sheila Triplett. And Mike.
Nice.
Yes.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you guys stay on after this, but I appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules. I hope you guys thought this was very productive and well informed.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Good evening.
Everyone, stay on. Everyone, thank you for joining us tonight. On behalf of myself from Span the Need and Action, we appreciate you taking time to watch the State of the Valley. We hope that you enjoyed and were informed of what was going on in the Valley and some of the things that you may have already, but I hope you learned something tonight, and I know I did. So everyone, if you'd like to see this podcast again, it'll be up for 24 hours and for future on anthonyvspano.com, as well as our YouTube channel. If you want any more podcast interviews or announcements, you can go to anthonyvspano.com. Everyone, stay safe. God bless. And everyone, have a great night. Thank you.